Hello and welcome back to our wellbeing series with me, Fatima, and consultant psychiatrist Dr. Mahmood Khan. We have in the previous weeks talked about sleeping, we've talked about breathing and how these small things can have a huge and positive impact on our mental well-being. Today we will be talking about thinking and hopefully giving you some more food for thought. Dr. Khan is with me now as usual. I'm going to start off by asking how you are.
I'm feeling really well, thank you, and really glad to be back.
It's very, very, very nice to have you back on our show as well. So thoughts and thinking. This is our kind of theme for today. Why have you chosen this theme? Why is there any point in talking about this?
So I think just to open with, our capacity for thought is one of the defining features of our human nature. My thoughts are really fundamental to who I am, how I understand myself and my environment. In short, human beings were thinking machines. Mm-hmm. And all humans, to varying degrees, are aware of having thoughts. Most people take their thoughts and thinking for granted. It's just something that happens. But hopefully I'd like to just kind of throw a little bit more light on that today. Mm. So Fatima, when was the last time you were aware of your own thoughts?
So I would say you asked me something similar about when I was aware of my own breathing in one of our previous podcasts, and I answered meditation. So probably when I last meditated, that was probably a good few weeks ago now, when I was aware of the way I thought and I was breathing at the same time.
So that's a really good example to share. And I like the way you've said a couple of weeks ago. All right. So that thought process has continued to do things for you, get you up in the morning, have something to eat, do all those things that make up your daily routine, and we're unaware of it. Mm-hmm. When we do become aware of our thoughts, there's lots of different ways. And the first one is, for example, we become aware of our thoughts when we're actively engaged in something that involves thinking. So as a student, you might relate to studying for your exams. Yeah. So as you're studying for exams, your thinking kind of I do know this, I don't know this, this is hard, I need to do something different here. So lots of stressful situations make us sometimes think a little bit more about what our thoughts are doing. The second one might be around when other people's thoughts conflict with our own. So a recent example might be around vaccination. Yeah. So you're talking to somebody about vaccination and you might be strongly in favour of having vaccination, somebody else might not. And then you realise, my thoughts are different to this person's. Yeah. And then from a clinical point of view, doing my day-to-day job as a clinician, I often come across patients that are mentally unwell. And when you assess some of these people, you find that it's difficult to follow their train of thought. Their thoughts are quite jumbled up. Mm-hmm. Equally, people that talk to me when they have quite bizarre thoughts, and that again makes you think about your thoughts as much as theirs. In short, thinking is commonplace. We all do it, but to unpick the nature of thought is not easy. And thinking is quite a complex phenomena, and for thousands of years, philosophers, and lots of them, a common one might be the philosopher who said, "I think, therefore I am." Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Scientists, psychologists, religious figures have all tried to understand and unpick what thought is.
And also you mentioned how you meet patients who might have bizarre thoughts, and I think that you saying that makes me think it's really important that you are able to have conversations about your thoughts and people are more aware of things like having maybe bizarre thoughts, because that means you're more open to communicate whether you might need help, whether you might just need to be able to talk to someone to figure your way through these thoughts.
That's absolutely true, yeah.
So my next question to you is, why are these thoughts important then?
So our thoughts are pretty much the start of everything. Whatever as human beings we've done in the past, are doing now, or what we will do, all depends first on our thinking. Yeah. This includes thinking about our well-being. So, as you said earlier, Fatima, we've talked about our breathing and sleep. And to improve both of these things in our lives starts with being more aware of our thinking. So better thinking impacts on all aspects of our lives, including our well-being.
Mm-hmm. And, so we're talking about thinking, that's the theme. What is thinking and what is the concept of thought?
So it's difficult to say precisely what is thought or thinking. And this is really well illustrated by the huge number of academic disciplines which have put forward lots of different theories in an attempt to capture the characteristic features of thought. One way to consider the word thought is how it applies to a distinct kind of event that happens. For example, as I'm talking to you, Fatima, you might say, "Ooh, I've just had a thought." Or it could relate to a specific activity. For example, if I've lost my keys and I'm looking for my keys. So this idea that I'm engaged in an activity to find my keys and I've got a thought process going on. Mm-hmm. And in common language as well, I might say, "I'm sorry, what did you just say there? I was lost in my own thoughts." Mm. Equally, you might say, "I've not had a good night's sleep. I'm too tired to think."
Mm-hmm. Yes. So is there anything that Islam says about thinking? Because in our previous podcast, we've related things like the sleeping and the breathing to what it might say in the Quran. So I'm just wondering, is there anything about thinking that, might have some relation to Islam?
So there's a common misconception in how both Muslims and non-Muslims view the Quran. There's a general belief that the Quran is there to tell people what to do, but this can't be further from the truth. The Quran strongly encourages all humans to develop their faculty of thinking. It really challenges the idea of what we might say blind faith. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, especially in the West, lots of Muslims who don't have Arabic as their first language often haven't read the translation of the Quran. And that just speaks to this misconception quite a lot.
So I'd just like to ask really quickly, how many times does the Quran mention thinking?
So the word thought is mentioned in the Quran 70 times.
Okay, wow.
But when you consider synonyms of thought, such as ponder, reflect, contemplate, remember, remind, all of these words together in the Quran, it's then mentioned thousands of times. The Quran encourages thinking in lots of different ways, by recounting stories and asking people to reflect on them, by encouraging people to contemplate on specific signs in themselves, like breathing and sleep, or signs in the environment. And the Quran also poses questions to encourage people to think for themselves and gives them knowledge and information on a huge number of subjects. These range from astronomy, with, including the rotation of the planets and the stars in the universe, psychology, and even embryology.
Yeah. And embryology, can you expand on that a little bit more, please?
The Quran talks about how, for example, conception happens and the different stages of the development of the embryo in the womb. It shares this knowledge, not that people should just hear it, but it should encourage people to think more about it. It's worth noting that in the first few hundred years of Islamic civilization, the huge amounts of advances in science, medicine, public health, and human rights was all down to encouraging better thinking in people. Unfortunately, all these advances don't seem to get as much press or acknowledgement.
And it's amazing when you think about it, because the Quran was revealed 1,500 years ago.
Absolutely. And, that's a long time ago. And for it to actually talk about all these different subjects and matters is a real eye-opener. And leading on from that, the Quran makes it clear that there should be no force or compulsion in religion. You cannot force someone to believe something that they don't want. And this encourages Muslims to hear other people's opinions and to respect different opinions.
Yeah.
Islam gives people the freedom to think for themselves and take responsibility for their thoughts and actions.
And so we've talked a little bit about why thoughts are important and what thoughts and thinking is. Where does thinking happen?
So it sounds like a really simple question.
Yeah.
And on the surface of it, the answer might be that our thinking happens in our minds and brains, but it's not that simple. Our thoughts are closely linked to consciousness, and science so far has really not got very far in explaining what we mean and understand by even what the mind is, or for that matter, what is consciousness?
Yeah.
This awareness of something happening. Where does that really originate? Not very easy. It's worth pointing out, though, in Islam, the heart is another fundamental aspect of human nature. And there is an important relationship between the heart, where our emotional side of our being resides, and our mind, where we might believe our thoughts originate. And there's a huge emphasis in Islam, an importance given to this connection between the heart and the mind.
Mm-hmm. So having talked about the importance of thoughts, how the next step I would imagine is becoming more aware of my thoughts. So how can I go about this?
So let's link this to our previous session on breathing. So if you remember, really good breathing, simple 3 steps as a starting point.
Yeah.
So breathing in and out through your nose, really breathing so that you use your tummy muscle to expand your chest.
Yeah.
And then when you're breathing out, just to breathe out using exhaling a little bit more than you normally would do. So as a exercise, just take a couple of deep breaths, Fatima.
Yep.
And I'd like you to notice what thoughts are going through your mind. What do you think? What's going on?
I'd say what's going on in my mind is, honestly,
Yeah.
is that I need to not make the breath too long, otherwise the listeners will be listening to too much of me breathing in and out.
Okay. So that's something you're saying to yourself,
Yeah.
which is okay. Anything else going through your mind whilst you were doing that?
Not really. It was more just kind of anxiety about not breathing for too long.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all normal given what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can just extend that exercise a little bit more. So Fatima, do you have a paper and pen?
Yep, I do.
Good. So I'm going to invite you to first of all write your full name on top of the piece of paper.
Yep.
And I'm going to now invite you to write a poem about yourself. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. And then I want you to share that poem, read that poem out to all of our listeners. Ready, steady, go.
I'm writing.
Okay, you can stop, Fatima.
Okay.
So this was a 5-second thinking exercise.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that was in 2 minutes.
So 5-second thinking exercise.
Right.
And what I'm really interested in knowing is what was going through your mind when I invited you to write that poem.
What was going through my mind was that I needed to make it rhyme, because rhyming is a good way of making a poem sound good, even if it's not very good. I was thinking this is a little bit nerve-wracking because I'm going to have to read it out to everyone to listen to, and that I needed to make it sound good.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Any thoughts about the past, perhaps memories that you had?
Yeah, I used to write poetry when I was younger. I used to have a poetry website, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to write down poems and they'd have names and pictures and stuff. I don't do it anymore, but I used to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all this exercise is doing is getting us to become more aware of something like the challenge that you had, which was write a poem in a couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. But when you're thinking about the thoughts that you had about that, what do you notice, Fatima, about some of those thoughts that you had? Were they helpful or not helpful?
I suppose the ones that were helpful were that I've done poetry before.
Good.
So it's something that I know I've enjoyed and that I was relatively good at. But I suppose unhelpful ones would be more like, I don't know if I can write this well enough in the time frame that I have, and everyone's going to listen to it and they might not like it kind of thoughts.
Okay, that's good. So it's just becoming aware of what's going on, because once you can become more aware of the thoughts that you have, you can then start to kind of use them in a bit more of a useful way. So there are some thoughts that you had, I've done poetry before,
Yep.
which are helpful thoughts. And what helpful thoughts do is that it energizes you. It pushes you forward. It allows you to take that step towards the goal that you want, which in this case was writing a poem.
Yep.
So it really does help you. Whereas other thoughts like, have I got long enough?
Yep.
Is a question that you've got. And it's a reasonable question to ask, but you're thinking, 2 minutes isn't long enough. Am I going to do it justice?
Yeah.
And then the anxiety, the nervousness, I'm going to have to share this.
Yeah.
And some of those thoughts may not be very helpful.
Yep.
Unhelpful thoughts do is that they hold you back, and they tend to crowd out some of the good thoughts as well. They demotivate you. They take you off track. So that thought about 2 minutes isn't long enough, or is it long enough? You might be able to, once you become aware of it, actually make it more helpful. And a way of that might be, for example, asking me, 2 minutes isn't long enough. Could I have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
And that frees up that tension that you have into, I've spoken, I want more information. Am I allowed more than 2 minutes? So it frees up your thoughts.
And I suppose it gives you a little bit more confidence when you've said that initial first thing to say something else if you want to.
Absolutely. It just frees up rather than lots of people with a challenge like this, they clam up.
Yeah.
Even people that are good at poems.
Yeah.
As soon as I say, write a poem about yourself, some people will say, oh, myself, what do I know about myself?
Yeah.
And they clam up.
Yeah.
So it's just an exercise to become aware of our thoughts a little bit more. The thing to notice a little bit is, Fatima, you were saying certain things to yourself. I've done poetry before. Is a statement that you're making.
Yeah.
Equally, a statement of, is 2 minutes long enough? Is a question, sorry. Okay? So we often think in terms of things that we say to ourselves and questions that we ask ourselves.
Yep.
And that dimension of our thoughts, things that we say to ourselves. For example, at the moment, I might be saying, I feel a bit warm.
Yeah.
And the next thought might be, why am I feeling warm?
Yeah.
So things that I'm saying and questions that I'm asking, that is my inner chatter. That is my inner voice that I associate with, that I link with, is me. And we all talk to ourselves. Roughly, science fact is roughly about every 11 seconds. Okay? So the more you become aware of your thoughts, the more you can then begin to make them a little bit more useful in terms of what you want to aim for in life in general. So another really important thing to acknowledge just about the thoughts that we have then is hindering thoughts, those thoughts that aren't as helpful. Hindering thoughts are normal, Fatima. Anybody who doesn't have hindering thoughts isn't normal. Everybody has hindering thoughts, and you're meant to have them. So I really don't want you or anybody else to walk away with hindering thoughts are bad.
Yeah.
The important thing is to become aware of hindering thoughts.
Yeah.
Once you become aware of hindering thoughts, you can then do something about that and move on and allow that thought to become a bit more useful or helpful. So that's really important. I just want to share a quote that I came across when in my early teens. It's quite a famous quote, and it's really just taken me a little bit of time to appreciate how powerful it is. So that quote goes along the lines of, you are not what you think you are, but what you think you are. And if you write that down and then say it to yourself, you are not what you think you are, but what you think with awareness. I've just inserted that now. What you think with awareness, you are. So lots of people have thoughts, but they're not really aware of them. And as soon as you become aware of your thoughts, you begin to realize this is my thoughts and I have responsibility in terms of being able to kind of see what those thoughts can actually do for me to kind of just have a better life. I don't know if you remember, but Fatima, when that exercise about writing the poem, I actually a number of times asked you, I'm going to invite you to write your name.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to invite you to write a poem.
Yeah.
What do you think the word invite means?
I think invite is you're not telling someone to do something, because I think as soon as you tell someone to do something, whether you like it or not, you're probably going to be met with a little bit of resistance in one way or another. But when you invite someone, they still have control and they still have choice over whether they want to accept your invitation.
Absolutely. That really, really well put. And we'll come to telling a little bit more later.
Yeah.
But the word invite is, like you say, a choice.
Yeah.
So you had a choice to write that poem. But did you hear the word invite?
Not really until you mentioned it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is somehow what our minds do
Yeah.
a lot of the times, because it's a bit of a challenging exercise, because it might be a little bit stressful, you don't hear the word invite. The mind just kind of blanks that out a little bit.
Yeah.
What am I going to write? How am I going to write this? What?
Yeah.
So it's just another thing about becoming more aware of not just our own thoughts, but other people's thoughts as well.
Yeah.
And as soon as you become more aware of your own thoughts, you're more likely to pick on some of those things that other people are saying. So I just want to kind of just say, this is what I've just shared with you there. If you want to know more about it, there's a lot that's already written, lots of different books on thinking and thoughts and how we can improve on them. One of them is, for example, Nancy Klein, and she talks about time to think.
Yeah.
Okay, really accessible book which says a lot about helping somebody's thinking to improve. Another one is go mad thinking.
Yeah.
And being a psychiatrist, I've got to be careful when I say go mad.
Yeah.
All right. But actually what it is, it's go mad is an abbreviation, make a difference.
Yeah.
So go make a difference.
Yeah.
Thinking. And it's by Andy Gilbert. Look it up, and really some useful, really, really useful things that people can all use in their everyday lives.